So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Vilnius. We have just closed the informal meeting of ministers, EU ministers responsible for cohesion policy. And we have discussed the new issues of this policy in the forthcoming period. As you perfectly know, last week there was an agreement reached between the Council and European Parliament on all the set of cohesion policy regulations. They will be formalized, will be taken as formal decisions in the first days of December and will come into full force. But as always, the most important issue is implementation. And since we have quite new, novel issues in the cohesion policy framework, European cohesion policy framework in the new financing period, we had to discuss how to manage with them. Particularly four topics were under discussion. First of all, thematic concentration. That means that clear priorities should be selected in the countries for the European money to be invested. Ex-ante conditionalities, so the countries should ensure that there exists a strategic basis for further investment of European money, and then better coordination of funds and policies, which would ensure some synergy, which is not a trivial task to be performed, a synergy between funds. And of course, another quite important issue, measurable indicators that should be achieved by investing European money. One of the main ideas that I do like very much is that our priority in Europe should be investment rather than better spending. Until now, we talked about better spending, but if invested, this money can leverage additional private sources, and this could enhance the efficiency of the cohesion policy. Many different issues have been discussed, and Presidency will formulate some conclusions. But now I give the floor to Commissioner Johannes Hahn, who will explain in more detail what the new cohesion policy could mean for us.
Thank you very much, Rimantas. Dear Danuta, colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank you and to congratulate our Lithuanian hosts for the organizing of this conference and also for the whole setting of the conference. I think it was again a very, very fruitful discussion, and as it was rightly said, we could adopt last week in the European Parliament after 2-year negotiations this very comprehensive reform. I would say the most significant reform since the introduction of cohesion regional policy around 40 years ago, and we could build on achievements of the current period where we have for the first time an alignment of the programs to the European strategy, namely the Lisbon strategy, and next period there will be a strong alignment to the EU 2020 growth agenda. I would like to thank both decision makers, the Council and the Parliament, and in particular the Lithuanian Presidency and the chair of the relevant and leading committee of this issue, Danuta Hübner, for the job they have done. It's more by chance that I'm sitting in between. This is not demonstrating that there have been different views. I think there have been different views, but both, and including the Commission, have been dedicated to this reform, and of course we had to discuss, as there are certainly different angles from which we can see some of the other points, but finally the achievements are there, and as it was rightly said, I think the main pillars of the reform are thematic concentration, ex-ante conditionality, so it must be clear in certain areas, for instance transport or support of SMEs, in which areas or what are the strategies behind a possible investment, and thirdly it's also about quantifiable results which have to be agreed at the beginning of a period, which will be published, and so everybody can follow the implementation. It was rightly said, we are now talking about implementation. Maybe it's worth to recall that the budget for the next period will be 325 billion euro, which is a slight decrease, but we know this discussion about an overall reduction of the European budget and the structural funds had faced the lowest cuts from all the different budget lines. But I believe that together with the national co-financing, the overall impact will be around 500 billion euro for the next 7 years, not taking into account the leverage effects by applying financial instruments, which might be an additional amount, and not taking into account, which I believe is the most important thing, the triggering effect for the private sector being now reassured about the budget for 7 years all around Europe for the different member states, and this hopefully will indeed trigger a lot of investments. And I also thank you for emphasizing, Rimantas, the new philosophy when we are talking about investment orientation. Of course, the concept of solidarity remained. It remained in the way that 70% of the overall budget will be spent to 25% of the less developed regions, and 30% will be provided to the more developed or transition regions. Another point I would like to highlight is that there will also be a move from a focus on infrastructure investments towards the promotion of the economy. Of course, there will be also in the future in countries like Lithuania significant and fair share dedicated to infrastructure projects, because you certainly have still to catch up. But on the other hand, it's undisputable that everywhere in Europe we have to invest in the economy. We have to promote the funding of new companies. Give you an example. We have all around Europe 23 million small and medium-sized companies, and we have around 27 million unemployed people. So if only the existing SMEs would employ an additional unemployed person, the problem of unemployment would be really resolved. It's a rather naive calculation, of course, but on the other hand, it gives you a flavor about the impact and the relevance of SMEs. That's why we will double the budget for the promotion of the economy from currently 70 billion to at least 140 billion euros around Europe, and this will definitely contribute to further growth, to competitiveness, and therefore to safeguard and even better to create new jobs. Thank you.
It has become a very good tradition at the informal ministerial meetings to have very important guests. And today we welcomed Professor Danuta Hübner, who is the chairwoman of the Regional Policy Committee of the European Parliament. So, Danuta, you have the floor to add something.
Thank you very much, and indeed I would like to say that I'm not only here because I was just invited, but because also for the first time in the history of European cohesion policy, the European Parliament has been as legislator on equal footing with the European Council, which is currently chaired by your finance minister. up to the previous edition of the policy, the European Parliament was giving the opinion on the regulation. Now, that's why we had all those difficult negotiations that lasted nearly 2 years, because we are equal co-legislators. That's one thing which I would like to say very clearly. Secondly, we waited with some nervousness for the vote in the European Parliament last week in Strasbourg, because the finalization of the negotiations of the cohesion policy was one of the preconditions to have a positive opinion of the Parliament on the entire budget for the 7 years, on the entire multi-annual financial framework, and that's why we are all very relieved when we saw that we got the majority for the policy regulation, and we got also a big majority for the new financial framework. There was a big success, I think, also of Lithuania as presidency. Certainly, I would like to say that when we were negotiating and agreeing finally on the final edition of the regulation for the cohesion policy, we had a double mission. One mission was to have really a good framework, good regulation, good cohesion policy that would fit the challenges, future challenges of Europe. And as you know, we desperately need growth, we need jobs, but we also need a more competitive European economy. And I think we have such a cohesion policy thanks to joint effort. But the second mission that we had was also to do it on time so that we can start the new wave of investment as of 2nd January. We will be ready with the regulatory framework to have the new policy in place, and everything will depend on how well member states will be prepared and finalize the concrete negotiations with the European Commission. And firstly, let me say that a challenge for member states today, when they are starting to implement the policy, is also to finish to the last euro the current allocations, because the Commission will continue with the approval of the projects. The policy will continue basically for 2 more years, and only then the current period will be closed, which means that there will be the years of overlapping, and this is an effort, but I think it's important not to forget about the need to complete the current period. Fifthly, let me say that there are many important issues on which we share the views. There were some issues where we had also differences between the Council, the Parliament, and the Commission. But I think it was important for all of us that we have the policy for all the regions, and I think we managed to have this. We have all the regions, the richer, the poorer, working together, also sharing experience, cooperating through also cooperation instruments. So that was very, very important. We also agreed that we will have 3 categories of regions, so not only the poor and the rich, but also regions in transition, which is for many of the new member states an extremely important also feature of the new cohesion policy. And also let me say that one of the most important, it was mentioned as achievements, and it was also very important for the Parliament, that we will have a lot of rules common for all the funds, not only regional, social, and cohesion, which is the cohesion policy, but also sharing the common rules with the Rural Areas Development Fund, which I think for Lithuania is also important, and also the Maritime and Fishery Fund, which is also, I think, important for Lithuania. But we also have in the regulation the provisions, the articles, pointing to the importance of good cooperation between the cohesion policy and other policies like Horizon 2020, which is investment and innovation policy. And then there were many other issues on which we managed, I think, to find the best possible compromises. So we are all happy, not only the Council, the Lithuanian presidency, the Commission, but also Parliament is happy that we have finalized.
Dear journalists, now is your time, but before you ask, I would like to say that we have interpretation here. It means, especially I address with my speech to my Lithuanian colleagues, if you would like to ask in Lithuania, please don't be hesitate, ask in Lithuania, in very beautiful Lithuanian language, okay? And now, who will be the first? But I would like to say one more, my request. When you're asking, please introduce yourself, okay? Who will be the first? Okay. You.
Artūras Ketlerius, Baltic News Service. Minister,
can I ask you more about the results? What are the indicators? Could you expand more on the indicators? Would the specific added value of the invested funds be calculated? And what is the difference between the current indicators and the previous situation? Because it was required to have the added value. Well, previously, the programs were supposed to create added value, which was being measured, for example, in social areas by the number of people who have found a job, by the creation of new jobs, or, for example, by how many people received a certain training. Now, every project will have to be evaluated according to certain indicators, following certain indicators. We will have to defend these indicators, otherwise the project will not be eligible for EU funding. Our discussion today showed that in all member states, the indicators raise a certain problem. For example, because we have to have these indicators both ambitious and realistic. So it's hard to tell what is the exact level we should aim for to make the indicators ambitious and realistic. So when the new programs will be implemented as of 2014, we will see what works and what not, and the legal acts will be amended accordingly.
Информационное агентство «Рекс», город Москва. Скажите, пожалуйста, как правильно в русском варианте Cohesion Policy?
Information Agency, I would like to ask how it should be done in the right way. Did you discuss different ways to prevent crises that emerged in the past in Greece? Thank you.
I don't think people got proper translation.
Nežinau, ar visi išgirdo tinkamą vertimą, nes iš rusų kalbos vertimas neužtikrintas.
Nevertheless.
Was about the prevention of further crisis so that we avoid situation like we had in Greece, and I don't know who, probably Minister, you would like to start on.
Maybe I would start answering to your first question. And in this case, we are talking about the regional rapprochement policy.
For the second question, of course, this is not the issue of this Council formation to discuss crises in Europe, because this is a very, very extensive policy area where, which includes also creation of the banking union that Lithuanian presidency works toughly upon. This is already the question of the issue being solved in the ECOFIN Council, in the Council of Ministers of Economics and Finance. And here we had cohesion policy, ministers responsible for cohesion policy. But of course, cohesion policy also has its goal to ensure level playing field and the fundamentals of single market throughout Europe by removing huge differences between regions in Europe that still exist. And I think this efficiently adds to prevention of crises in the future.
Maybe add, before Commissioner will probably also want to add something. On this second issue, the relation, the example of Greece and how we are going to contribute to the prevention of the type of crisis, I think there is, of course, a link that there are although major governance issues which are not coped with by cohesion policy, but one of the problems that led to the crisis was also that not all of European economies are equally globally competitive. We have a strongly divided Europe, and we have in short the southern part of Europe, which has much weaker competitiveness capacity to compete globally or even at the European level. And this policy is like tailor-made for this, because this policy is actually investing already now and will be investing even more in the future in all the factors which create competitiveness of the economies. This is also infrastructure, because if you don't have infrastructure in place, then nobody would go as an investor to the region, where you cannot just access the region. But also we invest with this policy, we'll be investing in the future as well in what is innovation, what is the capacity to have employment that will be sustainable, will not be lost tomorrow to the Chinese market. So yes, this policy will contribute to the competitiveness and will reduce the chances to enter into this kind of crisis that has started in Greece and Europe. Now, on the policy, cohesion policy as a mechanism to reduce the disparities of the development in the development level between the regions, this policy is all about it, and it does it through the mobilization of growth at regional and local level. And we provide instruments, policy instruments and funding instruments for the regions to invest in what is their strengths, to invest in their capacity to create jobs and to be competitive. And we see that regions which are poorer, they grow, usually the economy grows faster, and this way it also contributes to cohesion in the sense of reducing the disparities. But we do it through the smart investment in growth at the regional level, and through the cooperation between the regions, because stronger regions can be locomotives for the weaker regions. And I will just give the floor to.
This question gives me the opportunity to explain on a very concrete example what means ex-ante conditionality. So we will ask, or if you like, we will demand from all the 274 regions of Europe to come forward with, I would say, at least an idea, even better a strategy about the areas where business activities should take place. What are the assets, what are the potential of each of the 274 regions in Europe? So what in many regions is already there, a kind of cluster policy, to have an idea about the strengths, the assets, the potentials. It's not everywhere. And if you look into the economic structure and performance of some, in particular, Southern European countries, you will see that one reason of their problems is due to the very, very narrow scope of business activities. And therefore, one of the requests, one of the ex-ante conditions will be to have a smart specialization strategy for each region, which means clearly each region should be aware about its focus, in which business areas, in which branches it should invest, it should concentrate its financial means. And if this works out after 6-7 years, you would see a significant, not to say a tremendous effect on the performance of the European economy due to the use of structural funds.
Dalia Plikūnė, naujienų agentūra ELTA.
News agency ELTA. Minister, I'm here on the right. On your left. Well, which particular objectives of Lithuania will these funds help to achieve? And my next question is, what happens when Lithuania joins the Eurozone in terms of distribution? And next question is to the Commissioner.
New financial perspective by this investment.
Sorry.
What concrete goals you would like to achieve in the end of new financial perspective with this investment?
Well,
when Lithuania joins the Eurozone, in terms of cohesion policy, nothing is going to change. We, as member state which forms the budget are participating in the process, but we are also not only the contributors but also the beneficiaries of the budget, of the EU budget. Now, these funds are invested in various areas. I can expand on that. There are a lot of such areas, and in 2014-2020 we will have 2 additional areas where funds will be concentrated, that is energy and cultural policy areas. So these 2 new areas will help us achieve growth in our competitiveness. In Lithuania, in the new period, we will try to achieve much more through the measures of financial engineering. This means investment of funds rather than simple distribution of funds. This process would allow the processes which are under development, for example, renovation of buildings or building of infrastructure objects, to attract private funds. In this way, 1 invested euro will be tripled or even increased by 4.
Concerning the European goals, the lesson we have learned from the Lisbon strategy and the partial, wouldn't say failure, but non-achievements, is that we didn't break down European goals at the national, if possible, regional level. And this is exactly what we are doing now. So if we are talking, for instance, about a European goal concerning the R&D rate of 3% by the end of 2020, each of the member states has to identify its individual goal. So I'm not aware about the R&D rate of Lithuania.
Small, very small.
Yeah, but
shamefully small.
No, it's about the individual development of such a figure. So it's unrealistic that Lithuania will have 3% by the end of 2020. But if it's able to increase its rate at about 30, 40, 50% from the current level, it's already an important contribution to the achievement of the overall goal. So the overall European goals are laid down and agreed in the Europe 2020 growth agenda. There we have defined, for instance, R&D rate of 3% by the end of 2020, the portion of renewable energy 20%, then a reduction of the poverty, an increase of employment rate. All this is defined, and the next step was and is to break down these European goals at the national and, where appropriate, regional level. This is when we are talking about ambitious but realistic goals. And if each region is able to achieve these goals, it will definitely contribute to the overall European goals. That's why we have this strong alignment between EU 2020 and the use of structural funds, because, and when we are talking about added value, it's clearly because of this correlation between European goals and concrete projects contributing to these goals.
And the last question.
Eugen Solonina, Radio Liberty, Ukrainian service of Radio Liberty. My question is, how the results of future summit in Vilnius can, in case of Ukraine, can impact to the European cohesion policy, to the European economy and in other parts of European life? Thank you.
Well, I think for the moment it's not a satisfying situation. We have done a lot, and if you see the reaction of the Ukraine public, there is a huge disappointment about the latest developments. We have still some days, but nevertheless we have to continue. Ukraine is part of Europe, and this is our understanding, and whatever we can contribute we will do, and not to become tired, if you have not succeeded for the moment, it's not a shame, but it should be a good reason to try it again, because I think there's a clear understanding, and again the reaction are crystal clear. So we have a lot of opportunities also in terms of cross-border programs, of neighborhood policy programs, etc. And this we will certainly use. And in that respect, I'm as somebody know already, I'm a member of the party of the half-full class and not of the half-empty class.
Dear Commissioner, dear Minister, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, thank you for questions and for attention.